Hi, welcome to Forbidden Planet TV. I'm Laura Dodd, the head books buyer for Forbidden Planet, and we are joined today by the fabulous Nicki Pau Preto to talk about Bonesmith.
Yes!
Welcome
Thank
to
you.
FP Towers.
Thank you for having me. It's amazing. I can hang out around my books like this all day, so.
So how's your trip going in the UK so far? So you had an event last night?
Yes, which was amazing. It got off to a little bit of a rocky start because my flight got delayed. And so I was like flying all night. We didn't leave till like 5 a.m. and then I got here and we lose time. So suddenly it was like 8 p.m. I'm like, where am I? Who am I? So, it was a kind of a rough start, but we're here now. We're good. So yeah, slow start, better now.
Yeah. Food, coffee.
Yes, exactly. A little bit of sleep. We're good.
So, what can you tell us about Bonesmith?
Bonesmith. Well, it is about a character, a ghost-fighting warrior, who wants to sort of redeem herself after a mistake, and to do so, she tries to rescue a kidnapped prince. She has to journey across a haunted wasteland and kind of prove herself and kind of reclaim what she's lost. So she's got a bit of a chip on her shoulder, and haunted wasteland, so we're talking, bodies, ghosts, bones, all that fun stuff.
Good stuff,
yes.
So we've kind of, if anyone's obviously familiar with your other series, so we've gone from kind of riding phoenixes to killing the undead.
Yes, natural progression, right?
Sure.
Totally normal.
So, how long has this idea kind of been floating around?
Yeah, I think it was kind of in the background of my head, I guess, at least through the last book of the Crown of Feathers series, maybe even earlier. Like, it was something I would kind of tinker with when I had breaks, which were rare. Those were long books and I felt like I didn't have a lot of free time, but it was like cooking for a while, so at least I guess a couple years before I really had time to work on it. So it was kind of stewing.
Yeah. And what kind of came first for you? Was it the world, or was it like Wren just like kicking down the door and saying, I demand?
Yes, I demand to be written. It was, I think the character stuff was where I started weirdly. I knew I wanted, even Wren took a while to come to fruition, but like I knew I wanted this like enemies kind of having to ally to rescue someone and to cross like dangerous territory to do it. We mentioned like Game of Thrones being kind of inspiration, especially like the wall and the concept of like on the other side of it and all that. So like that was definitely part of the initial idea. But I think Wren really came into focus once I figured out like the bone magic stuff, and then I kind of then she really, I think, solidified. But yeah, the sort of, I guess that's more of a plot thing than a character thing, the idea of like two enemies and doing the rescue. So I guess plot maybe. Weirdly, that's weird for me actually when I think about that. I'm like, I feel like plot's the last thing I worry about, but that like concept, trope maybe, that's like trope if anything, but yeah. And
we have to say, like, the magic system in this is incredible. I don't think I've kind of like read anything similar to it. Cool. So where did the kind of the ideas of the different the kind of different smiths and the different kind of, I suppose, political allegiances, and then the kind of bone magic, where did that all come from?
Yeah, so initially when I started to think about the world, I wanted to do something that was almost like an elemental magic system. So I always mention like Avatar of the Last Airbender is like a great, it's just a really great, like that was definitely what I was thinking about. So, but I wanted to do something slightly more unique, so I was like kind of tinkering, and I was like, metals are cool, like, and then thinking about materials that kind of come from the earth. So I mentioned in the book like stone smiths, and I mentioned like wood smiths kind of briefly, silver, other metals. And then somehow, like, I find myself thinking of, like, bone as a material, and I was like, oh, like, I never set out to write anything about ghosts or undead or anything. But then when I'm like, oh, imagine, like, bone as a material you could control with your magic, and then it sort of, like, opened, like, suddenly everything came from that. I'm like, oh, and it really fell into place, and that's when it became, like, I'm like, oh, yeah, this is a book now. Like, I think I know what I would do here. And then, I just kind of pursued that, and just thinking about how they would, where the magic came from, how they would learn, how they would set, how they kind of built their society from there. But since Wren is the main character, I focused more on like the bone magic. But yeah, so it's kind of like a weird circuitous route. But once I figured out the bone, I was like, yes, I got it, finally.
And I love the whole kind of idea, I suppose, of people kind of travelling in pairs and having to kind of work together to put like the dead to rest.
Yes.
It's just such a good. Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, I really was really excited about like that part especially. Yeah, it really came together well. I think I was like, oh, like finally I had it, and it's super fun idea. Yeah, I mean fun. It's kind of disturbing, but fun for me.
Disturbing and fun, which is how we like them.
Yes, exactly right.
So I think one thing I've kind of noticed in your previous series and in this is obviously a love of a strong female protagonist and someone you can really kind of root and get behind. So, yeah, how important is that? And is it kind of, I suppose, ever tricky to kind of keep it authentic? Like, you want that character to feel real in that universe and not like a kind of box ticking bit. She's kick-ass.
Yes. No, totally. And I think we tend to like people who are flawed. Like if someone's too kick-ass or too perfect, you kind of don't like them as much, or you can't relate. So I think I love writing, you know, the strong female. Like that's just something I mean, as a woman writer, I guess it's just what I want. It's, you know, and as maybe when you were reading, like I know when I used to pick up epic fantasy, it was sort of hard to find in some of the stuff I was finding when I was younger. I think young adult in general has really kind of exploded and filled that hole. But I think having your characters well-rounded, and for me, like a lot of it happens, I suppose, intuitively, but I do have to kind of stop and think about who they are, what they want. I never want them to be perfect, and I don't think even, like, hopefully none of my characters are wholly good or wholly bad. Like, hopefully everyone's got kind of, like, the bad people, I hope, have something you can kind of understand, or, you know, some good qualities, and same, I would hope the good characters have, you know, I think Wren makes a lot of mistakes.
Yes. And
I think I was aware that some people might be, you know, she might be frustrating, or people might get mad at her, but I think that's, I mean, it's normal, and it drives the plot, and I think it really shapes who she is. Like, you know, the kind of opening, you know, everything that happens in the opening, like, that's really shapes her, and I think that's key to making them cool and badass and everything, but also, like, realistic and, like, actually likable and relatable. Even if you maybe are like, oh, how would you do that? But you still kind of get why they would. Yeah. So, I guess, like, find balance, right? But
definitely. I think you want your characters to be, you could go to the pub with them.
Oh, I'd love to go to the pub with Wren. I think she'd be so fun. God, like she'd be a mess, but she'd be awesome.
Oh, such a mess, but so good.
The best kind of person to go to the pub with, right?
Exactly. So, do you think you would ever kind of revisit any of the characters in kind of like a short story, or... Because there's someone like the female mentor character, Odile.
Yes.
Who I adore.
Oh,
I want to know her story.
Right? I would love to. That would be so fun. That's a good point. I find I mean, maybe everyone does this, but I spend a lot of time thinking about like the world building and the backstory, and then you end up writing this like compelling backstory that you like, I want to write this now, like, but you can't. You can only sort of show glimpses of it. So I think there is a lot of interesting stuff in the backstory. I think that could definitely happen. Like, I think there's a lot there for sure.
Yeah.
That you can only share so much. In, you know, unless you want your books, which my last series were very fat books, but you know, you have to kind of limit yourself apparently. But yeah, I would love to do that. Even just like, you know, there's most of the stories told from Wren, but there's some chapters from the other characters, right? And that's always such a treat to get to write, even if I'm like, I mentioned I was like not wanting to do that because I didn't want this book to be as long as my Crown of Feathers series. So I was like, no, one point of view. But once I do it, like, it is so fun. You get to know the characters well. It'd be so fun to take a character and like, I would learn more about them, right? Like, that would be very fun to do. Oh, I'd love to.
Yeah. And I think there's quite a refreshing thing happening in books at the moment where I suppose older protagonists and older characters are kind of getting more screen time, more page time. And I know Joanne Harris and I think Mark Lawrence are currently working on projects with a older protagonist, which, so you could like...
Yeah. Oh my god, yeah. And I think, like, if it is related to another property, like, it might be easier to tie, you know, to kind of pitch that because it is, you know, a YA book. But yeah, I think a lot of people would actually be. She is someone I hear, like, a lot about people like her, so she would be fun. But, like, I think, like I said, the whole backstory, like, there's probably a lot I could do there that would be fun because, you know, I do that. Right? Like, and I'm one of those people that does a lot of the, like, side backstory work that doesn't, you know, like, you see, like, 2% in the book, but I sit there and do it all at home. I'm like, no one's going to see this, but it's fun for me, so I probably have enough stuff.
So if, in your previous series, there were obviously the phoenixes as kind of the main kind of mythological creature. So if you could bring one creature from myth, other than phoenixes, what would be your ideal, like, pet?
Oh, see, the funny thing about Phoenix is I'm actually kind of scared of large birds.
Oh,
of
wow.
birds,
Okay.
kind of. Which, like, tell people that, and they're like, really? And you decide to write a trilogy about them? And I'm scared of heights, so I feel like as cool as it would be to have a pet you could, like, fly, I would be, like, terrified. And I think, like, in the real world, no. Oh, that is really hard. I've seen, like, something like the teacup dragons or like something like that would be like, I feel like more my speed. Something like cute and little, like it would be great to have this like epic beast, but I don't think I could handle it very well. So something like maybe a little teacup dragon or something would be fun, which I guess is just like a lizard, let's be real. So but it sounds way cooler to call it a teacup dragon. So
so in kind of both your previous tips and this book, there's I suppose the idea of using kind of armor, using makeup, dressing up as a boy, for example, to kind of go forward, do what you need to do in the world. Is that kind of a again an important kind of idea of these people putting their armor on, putting their like the thick makeup on, like Gene Simmons kind of. I was
very. It's funny. So like the girl dressed as boy thing. For some reason, I just love that trope to death.
Yes.
I've thought about it. I'm like, I think maybe because I had two older brothers growing up, so for me, I was like, I can do what they can do, and something about that. It's like very simplistic, and I love that people are doing new things with the trope, right? But I loved that. Like, I think that trope was just like, I have to write it. And I didn't really consciously maybe think of it so much, but I know for this book, I was like really aware of like the aesthetics of it and like how I wanted things to look. And like, I loved the like eye black idea and like having it make sense in the world and having it, like, I think that was important for me too. And like bone armor and bone repels the undead. Like it has a purpose. Like as much as it's cool to like play with the aesthetics, I always wanted it to like tie into the world building and make sense. So I was definitely more aware of it with this series. I feel like Crown of Feathers was kind of, I don't know, first series. I feel like you just do things and after you're like, oh, why did I do that? Like you don't really think about it as much maybe. So I feel like I was more aware of it with this series, but I guess that is interesting. Yeah, I guess I do. Maybe it's a subconscious thing that I can think about it. But yeah.
So we also have to kind of touch on the political system, which is, I love when there's like juicy politics in like any books. Is that the kind of thing you're keeping like charts of and notes and who's where and what year this happened and who's betrayed who in the past? Or does it just as you kind of come to things, you're just like, oh, okay.
It's like I try really hard to be the former. Okay. I start off that way. And then it's like things slowly devolve into utter chaos and then I have to literally like find and search in my own documents to remember things. I'm like, did I do this? What happened? Did I change? So it's so hard. I think I do a lot of revisions as a writer. Like I love to revise and I do heavy revisions. And it's hard to keep all my documents updated. And it's like I start really strong that way. I have my timelines, I have all this, and then eventually I'm like, oh, I'll change that because it just makes more sense here. Or actually, I think that's too much time. I'm going to truncate that. And then I don't always like update my stuff. So eventually the book is literally the only place I'm like, whatever's in here is the truth. Like, otherwise I'm not wholly sure what's the truth. So it's like, I want to be that person, but I am not. So I'm sad to say. Shamefaced. It's really hard in a trilogy. Like, the longer you go, you're like, oh my god, what have I done? And it's hard to remember, because again, you're revising so much, like, I can't remember which iteration actually made it to print. I'm like, oh, did I cut that? Like, sometimes people will ask me things, I'm like, wasn't that in there? Like, I forget. So, yeesh, it is a weirdly chaotic process, at least for me.
And retconning your own trilogy as you're writing.
Right, I'm like, oh my god,
that
whoops.
didn't happen.
Yeah. Oopsie.
So what are you working on next? Is it the next?
There is a sequel coming next year, so I've definitely been working on that. And then I also have a middle grade coming out next year as well. Cool. It's called The Last Hope School for Magical Delinquents, which is a super fun title. And it's kind of like the kids who would get expelled from like regular magic school. They all wind up at this school for like kids with like weird magic and behavioral problems, and it's been so fun to write. So it's very different. I think that's been really great for me to like switch between them. So both those come next year. So yes, busy.
No pressure.
No pressure at all.
So to finish off our interview today, so what are you currently reading, watching, and if you game, what are you playing?
I don't game. I'm not cool enough for that. I love the soundtracks. I love the idea of gaming. For some reason, I can't game. What am I watching? Okay, let me think for a second here. What did I just watch? Oh, I should keep a list of these things. Okay, books I read recently. I just read Emily Wilde's Encyclopedia of Fairies, which was like, oh my god. And then actually right after that I read very secret society of
Irregular
witches. Sorry, I'm like, these titles, they're all so long. They're very kind of similar. Like, I just read them back to back. I'm like, oh my god, I'm obsessed with these two. Those are my two recent. I loved them. I can't remember what shows I've watched. I just watched, like, extremely late, the Wednesday Addams show. I'm one of those people that's, like, the opposite of a bandwagon jumper. Like, if something's popular, I'm like, okay, I'll wait a few months and I'll check that out. So, I'm like, everyone was loving it. I'm like, yeah, I'll watch that eventually. And so I just got that, I guess, when I was off my last deadline. So I watched that. I loved that. And it was actually, like, when I was writing my middle grade school book, I'm like, oh, like, this is a fun, like, similar vibe. So I guess that's the most recent new thing. I'm one of those people that anxiety stress watches the same things, like, over and over.
Oh, like Gilmore Girls.
Exactly, just like any old show. So yeah, I think that's the most recent, like, new thing I've watched. So
you should, if you haven't read Witch's Guide to Fate Dating a Demon.
No, I think I actually have it on the e-reader.
It's very fun.
Is it? Okay.
Sarah's second book, I think, is coming out quite soon as well. So you'll have a next book to go, like,
that's the worst when you're reading, like, oh, I gotta wait a whole year. So yeah, oh, that's a good one. Yeah, I think I actually have that on my e-reader.
It's super fun.
Awesome.
Really, really fun. But yeah, thank you, Nicki, so much for joining us today, and for obviously more to sign now.
Yes. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you so much. And we will have signed copies available on our website and going to all of our stores across the UK. So if you don't want to order online, just pop into your local branch. But yeah, hopefully see you guys soon. Bye.
Bye.
If you're enjoying watching Forbidden Planet TV and you're enjoying watching us talk to the world's most interesting and accomplished filmmakers, authors, artists, musicians, creators, subscribe right here. See you soon.